Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. You've landed on Zero Limits Living. Every week, I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. We're going to do it again this week, only this week we're going to be focused on your kids, you and your kids. And we want to make a dramatic difference in that area. Now, I'll tell you about that in a minute. The first thing I want to say is thank you. I want to say thank you because this show is young, new, and already popular. It is now being seen or heard on 1,000 different platforms. 1,000. That's everything from Amazon, Fire, Roku, Apple TV, Spotify, YouTube, and probably any of them that you would name. That is flattering, and that is a very wide reach. So thank you for that. The second thing is people are always asking about coaching. So I want to remind you that I started a coaching program almost 20 years ago. It's proven, it's tested, it's trademarked, and you can have a free consultation to find out what it's all about. Just go to miraclescoaching.com, miraclescoaching.com. And also, before we go too deeply into this, I'm putting all of the shows in one place for the ease of finding them. So if you want to binge on Zero Limits Living TV, go to zerolimitslivingtv.com and relax and take notes and watch all the shows. So where are we going today? What we're going to do today is talk about the secrets self-made millionaires teach their kids. Pretty good, right? Self-made millionaires teach their kids. I want to know what this is. The man I brought here is somebody I've known for almost 20 years. He has had a profound impact on my life. He is doing me a huge favor and you a favor by being here. I remind you, I don't get paid to be here. My guest doesn't get paid to be here. You probably didn't pay to access the show. So what we're doing is giving you information that is falling out of the sky into your lap. All I ask is that you listen, you be present, you take notes, and you take action. And then you can expect miracles. Let me tell you about today's guest. He sent a bio, but I like the one that was in the back of the book better. Steve Siebold is an internationally recognized authority in the field of psychological performance training. His clients include Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, Caterpillar, and hundreds of others. Too many that I can list. Since 1984, Steve has interviewed more than, brace yourself, 1,200 self-made millionaires and billionaires, and these interviews continue today. His books include 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class, one of my favorite books, and How Rich People Think. Also, his latest book is this one, Secrets Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. Steve has been featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, CNN World News, Fox Business Network, CBS. It goes on and on and on. The guy is an authority beyond belief. He's the past chairman of the National Speakers Association $1 Million Speakers Club. He ranks among the top 1% of professional speakers in the world. And I don't always mention this, but he's been married to Don Andrews, who I also know, for 32 years. In fact, it's probably longer because the book came out a year or so ago. And they reside in a historic home office, and I believe it's pronounced the Bona Allen Mansion. Steve, are you in the Bona Allen Mansion?
I am.
How does it feel to be in a mansion?
God, feels good, Joe. Feels good. Feels large. I feel small.
But I looked at pictures of it on the internet and I thought, well, I'm coming to visit. He's got 17 rooms in there. One of them is mine.
Yeah, and a guest house. You got to come. It's great.
I look forward to it. And one of the reasons I'm pointing out that you live in a mansion is that you didn't always live in a mansion. In fact, 1984-ish, you were struggling. And that, I believe, was the turning point year when you decided to go and interview millionaires. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was a sophomore in college, but I grew up on the national junior tennis circuit with rich kids. I was not a rich kid, but I grew up with rich kids, a lot of them around the country, and then some around the world. And they had tennis courts in their backyards, and they come to the matches in limos and planes and all kinds of fancy stuff. I thought, man, those guys are doing something right. I need to find out what's happening here. So I got interested in it in college and started interviewing, like you said, in 1984. In the beginning of the year, February '84 was my first interview, and still interviewing them today.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. When you were a kid and you saw them driving around in limos and going to their dinners and being members of the clubs, the high ticket clubs, were you jealous or were you driven to be like them?
Well, I think initially I just didn't really understand how there could be such a gap.
Yeah.
We were staying there. They're staying at the Ritz-Carlton. We're staying at the Motel 6 or the Red Roof Inn back then. If you remember, Joe, it was $12 a night. No TV, $12 a night. But if you wanted the fancy one, the Holiday Inn was $24 a night, but it had a black and white TV. And we're eating at Kmart, at the cafeteria at Kmart, and they're eating at all these fancy places. So we always had to make excuses of why we couldn't go to the fancy. We don't feel like going to the Ritz-Carlton. So, whatever it was. And so I think maybe initially I wasn't so much being jealous as much as because I was a little kid. I didn't understand why some people had so much more than others. And then I just got kind of driven to find out why.
And what I want to know is, why were you driven? And the reason I ask is, as well as I that there's so many people who are going to remain complacent in their comfort zone. And they're going to look at the wealthy people, and instead of wondering why they're wealthy or longing to be wealthy, they're just going to put them down in some way, some cynical, skeptical way, and maintain their status quo. That's what I think the average person is doing. What made you snap out of that trance of limitation?
It just looked like a better life. I mean, it looked like a life, it just looked better. It looked like a life where you didn't have to worry all the time and talk about, pinching pennies all the time. And they seem to just have a worry-free, or what looked like to be a worry-free life. And I thought that's got to be worth investigating.
Right. And so you started interviewing them. Did you find that they were easy to interview? Did they all say yes? Were any of them like, get away from me?
Very few of them were like, get away from me. Especially, I was 19 years old when I started. So I found a friend that has said, he said, my uncle's a self-made millionaire in Louisiana, and maybe he'll let you interview him. That's where it started. And I said, okay, great. And I did. And the guy was very, very nice, very forthcoming, and I interviewed him, I think, for 3 hours. And I said, do you have any friends or other people that are rich? And he said, I'll never forget this, Joe. He looked at me and said, all my friends are rich. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And that was a lesson right there. I didn't know I was going to learn down the road, but the rich people tend to hang around other rich people. But I said, would you mind introducing me? And he said, well, for what purpose? And he said, because they don't like to really be, they're kind of stalked. I mean, most wealthy people, as you know, are not out in front bragging about their money. They're hiding. They don't want to be contacted by the press or, by people. And he said, I said, I just want to learn. He said, well, if that's all you want from them, he said, then I can introduce you. And that introduction got me into all these levels of people success-wise that I never would have been able to get into myself.
Now, you know very well that this is a very clear parallel to Napoleon Hill, seeing Andrew Carnegie and interviewing him for hours, and then after being challenged to go and do the research about the science of success, it gets introduced to one millionaire, then another, and those introduces him to other millionaires. It sounds like you were just living the Napoleon Hill story.
Yeah, it felt like that. I hadn't read Think and Grow Rich. Matter of fact, one of the millionaires told me to read Think and Grow Rich, and I think I read it maybe a year into the interviews. I had never heard of that book. I wish I'd have read it before, but yeah, it does feel kind of similar. And luckily, I was lucky enough to get up front and close with them, and then they kept recommending me, and I just got deeper and deeper. And literally, I'm still interviewing from those circles that started in 1984, which is almost 40 years ago.
Yeah. Well, clearly you're doing well enough that you're living in a mansion, a historic mansion at that. So I would say that you're going to be interviewed by other people, including me. We're doing it right now. So when you were doing the initial interviews, what was surprising to you? What did you go, I didn't know that? It's like, the rich people do this. We don't do that as poor people or middle class people.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really kind of shocked me was sort of the way they thought they saw the world in sort of a dichotomy. The first thing I like an example would be one of the first interviews, the guy said, the world, you have to start with the premise that the world is both a brutal place that's unforgiving and a beautiful place at the same time. And if you navigate it with that through that lens, it's going to be much easier to understand that things are not fair all the time and things that can go wrong, but also people can be mean, they can be vicious, they can be extremely generous on the other side. So understand as you're entering the world that's what you're entering. There's a lot to it, and keep your eyes wide open. Don't get trapped in either side, either the brutal side and become a cynic, or the beautiful side and become a Pollyanna optimist. Kind of balance the two, and that helped me a lot.
That's actually very wise, but it seems like it's very wise no matter who you are and how much money you have. It seems like whether you're a millionaire or not, that's actually something to keep in mind, is not to become too cynical or not to become too blind.
I agree. Yeah.
What did you find that was absolutely, you resisted it? It's like, this is something they do. I don't know that I want to do that. Or I'm resisting doing what they told you that self-made millionaires did.
I think one of the things that shocked me initially, and I just didn't understand it, Joe, was that they said, don't buy into this idea. This was common themes across the years of interviews, but especially in the early days, they said, don't buy into the idea that people are equal, because they're not equal. Of course, I was a kid, and I thought, well, all people are equal. I mean, we're just human beings. And they said, well, that's not what we're saying. That people aren't equal in the context of different people have different levels of talent, intelligence, contacts. They're born in the right country or the wrong country. So it's not a level playing field. Don't buy into that. And they told me that over and over. And I always thought, I thought it was a level playing field because I was naive. And I had a hard time with that one for a while. And then after a while, I understood that it makes sense to think that way. And it actually is objective reality when you look at it. We all come in with different talents and that kind of thing, and different levels of ambition and whatever. So we're not actually equal. We might be equal as human beings, but we're not equal in terms of what we're capable of, or what we know, or where we live, or whatever it is. So that was hard for me to get my arms around, but eventually I did.
Yeah, that is a big one right there. And I'm also keeping in mind that there's people watching and listening to this show all over the world. And I remember when I was in Russia, I think it was the first time, and there was a reporter there, and he was very dark. He was dark, and he just thought what I was talking about with positive thinking and taking action, and you can change your life, and I was homeless, and now I'm blah, blah, blah. He thought it was almost impossible for somebody in Russia. He didn't see the potential. And I'm bringing this up as a kind of probing question for you, Steve. We've just gone through a pandemic that apparently is still going on. And I left Russia, and, they're bombing the Ukraine. So the Ukraine's not doing so great right now. And I have friends over there. Is it true that virtually anybody, anywhere, especially somebody that could read your books or watch this show, has a fighting chance to be a self-made millionaire?
That's a really good question. It's a big one too. I think that with the, I don't want to be too broad about this, because obviously, if you're in a country like the United States or Canada or Australia or, the UK, or a region like the UK, you have an advantage. There's no question about it. I mean, but so this idea of anyone can do it, I think with the right ambition, it might be more difficult, but I think anyone that really wants to do something has a shot. Now, maybe it's a long shot, because like you, I've traveled around the world for, lots of years, and your eyes get really big. We live in Disneyland, and until you travel, I don't think people, I didn't realize it, at least, it's just a whole different thing. The world does not look like the United States all over the globe. And so I would say if someone really has the ambition, they have a shot. Now, maybe it's a longer shot than you and I had, for sure. We had more advantages, but I think they have I want to believe, Joe, maybe that's the way I should say it. I want to believe they have a shot. I might be wrong, but I certainly want to believe they do.
Well, I would think it's a wiser approach to take the shot than to roll over and play dead. And I'm talking to anybody that's watching or listening that is considering, well, I do have a dream, and I do want to be a self-made millionaire, and I do want to grab the gusto and manifest it. If they're at that point and they're listening and they're watching and they got both of us here, I would say that person should be taking action for their dream.
Good point. Good point. And I mean, if the premise of becoming a self-made millionaire in a free market economy, or even a semi-free market economy, is solving problems, then I would focus completely, like most, self-made millionaires do and entrepreneurs do, focus on solving a problem. And the bigger problem you solve, the richer you get.
I want to look at that again. And I hope you don't mind, Steve. I want to put your feet in the fire a little bit here. I mean, I love you. I admire you. I am so grateful for you. You have helped me out, like I mentioned in the introduction, with your Mental Toughness Institute and so forth that we did 2 decades ago almost. I'm a fan of your books. I buy all of them. I didn't know about the new one until we got ready to do this show. So I'm on your side. But as I'm looking at you and we're talking about these different things, you talked about beliefs and you talked about objectivity. I think one of the things that needs to be defined here is what's the difference between a belief and objective reality? It's something you taught me decades ago.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I think what it is a belief can be wrong. I mean, obviously, you can program yourself. A belief can be emotional. It can be absolutely illogical, and it still drives behavior. Whereas objective reality is the way things are, and there's no questioning it. So, but the key is, as you know, Joe, is that if a belief serves my best interest, it may not be objective reality in the current state of things, but I can drive my behavior with a belief that may not be currently true and then make it true. Yes. And I think that's the beauty of the process. Right.
Well, you had made the comment just a second ago about one way, a path, and it's in your book, a path to wealth is solving problems. And the bigger the problem you solve, the more wealth you can generate. And the problem I have with that problem statement is not everybody understands what problems are. And I know when I say that, it's like we all know what a problem is because we're complaining about them all the time, not from the financial wealth key to success. When you say find a problem and solve it, and then wealth can come to you, a lot of people sitting around going, how do I do that? It's almost like the Zig Ziglar famous quote about if you help enough people, they will help you. How do I help them?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That it is misunderstood sometimes. I know I do a lot of press, a lot of TV, as you know, and whatnot. And people will email me afterwards and say, I don't understand the concept of the problem solving. Well, like, for example, just as one example, what we did for 25 years or 23 years before COVID was going to companies, low performing sales teams, and do turnarounds for large corporations for sales teams that were underperforming or performing at the mid-level. So the problem they had was they wanted more revenue. The company like a Johnson & Johnson or a Procter & Gamble, they wanted more revenue coming in that division because it was underperforming. So we went in, helped them on the psychological performance side, helped they get their numbers up, which increased their market share. And that's the problem they paid us to solve for 23 years with different teams. So there's the problem. You come in with a solution. And of course, the bigger the solution you provide, the more it's worth on a monetary scale. So you're looking for problems you can solve that you have the skill set, the background, the passion for, all those things. Then you direct all that passion and skill and process into solving the problem. And again, look for the biggest problems you can possibly solve, because that's where the money's going to be for you.
I love how you're explaining this. So thank you. But I got to remind you, now we're talking to kids. Secret self-made millionaires teach their kids. How do we get kids? The kids are sitting there. As far as I don't have kids. Do you have kids?
I don't have kids either.
Yes. And so, we're two experts on kids here.
All right, exactly.
In many ways, we are experts because we can observe what the parents are actually not seeing, because they're in their own belief system. They're in their own reality. They may not see the objectivity that you and I might. Point being here now, Secret Self-Made Millionaires Teach Your Kids. Wonderful book. I want everybody to go get it. I bought mine on Amazon. How do kids think about problems? If there are kids, and I'm assuming you mean anybody that can read the book or had the book read to them, teenagers on up to young adult, how do they think in terms of problems? What, maybe an example, maybe somebody that's already read the book and done this?
Yeah, it's funny you mention this, because I've been doing TV shows for the last 2 weeks on chores, on monetary compensation from parents to children on chores. Just by chance, it's been kind of a hot thing in the press the last couple of weeks for some reason. And so, what we've been talking about is, hey, for the parents to make a list of things like, look, here's the problem the parent has. The dog is rolled around in the mud and he's all dirty. And for $5, you will pay you to wash the dog. So now you're solving a problem for the parent. The bed's got to be made, the lawn's got to be mowed, the car's got to be washed, whatever problems the parents present to the children. And then they attach a monetary value to solving that problem. They learn how the economic system actually works. And it's a great opportunity for parents to be able to teach their kids how the system actually is put together.
Were you brought up on the chore method? Were you paid for doing chores?
Very little. I was underpaid, Joe. I'm fighting him in court. I'm still in court 50 years later fighting him now. No. Yeah, we got 75 cents to pick the weeds and little things like that. We had to do the regular chores like make your bed and clean your room and all those things. But we got a little bit of money on it. So that was good. But it was never explained in an organized fashion. Right. Which would have been a really great advantage. I mean, it would have been great to have kids and to be able to really walk them through the free market system and show them that way. And this, Joe, because, I've employed hundreds of people in my companies. You've employed people. And I can't think of 5 people I've interviewed for job positions in our company over the years that were really good at doing interviews because they talk about what they want as opposed to saying, I want them to solve my problem for this position. And if they understood how to come to an employer and say, look, I'm here to solve your problem in X, Y, Z, and I have the skill set and I have the background, and here's how I'm going to take away your problem, they'd get the job a lot more often than they do now. And so it's great to be able to teach them when they're young.
Well, here, I didn't have chore payment. I never got what did you call them? An allowance. I never got an allowance of my entire life.
That explains a lot, Joe. That explains a lot. Now I get the whole picture.
My father took me out to work on the railroad when I was 5 years old. And I, as a 5-year-old kid, just thought, wow, I'm going to go to work with my dad. And I'm going to sit beside him in the truck and I'm going to go to wherever he goes and do whatever he does or watch him. No, he put a hammer in my hands. He put a pitchfork in my hands. He taught me how to tamp ties, which is a gandy dancer term for doing labor on the railroad when I was 5. And what I learned very quickly is I can make money from hard labor and really good money as I got older. I also learned I hated it. I remember daydreaming. I can't wait till I'm an author.
No kidding.
I'm going to sit indoors with back then, my typewriter. I'm going to just punch out things and they'll send me money. I don't have to go and work outside. But here's the thing. Even if you were brought up being paid an allowance for chores and so forth, or I was being brought up working on the railroad at a very young age, I was not taught prosperity. I was not taught abundance. Were you?
We had a lot of sayings around our little town and the church and the sports coaches and the teachers and nice people, very middle class, Chicago-based, Chicago area neighborhood. But I remember hearing mostly about the rich people in town, which weren't super rich people, but they were richer than most of us. That they had to be crooks. Rich people have to be crooks because nobody is worth that kind of money. And of course, that's ridiculous in a free market economy. Of course they are. They're solving a bigger problem. That's all it is. I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think people, just like you say, it's misunderstood to the point where you get these negative beliefs about money get embedded in our minds. And we carry that stuff. Most people carry it, I think, throughout their entire lives. And it's really a shame.
How do we change it? That is my big question. I've been reading your book, and I so love the book, Secret Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. And part of me is going, all right, I don't have kids, but I got nephews and a great nephew, and I got a niece. And if I put this in their hands, which I haven't had a chance to yet because they're thousands of miles away, part of what I would imagine is going on is how do they replace the limited programming with the prosperity programming? How do they swap beliefs? If they're sitting there going, well, only the rich people are going to get more money, or any variation of a scarcity statement, but they're reading it almost like they're reading a novel because it hasn't clicked. How do they get it to click? How do the people watching who do have kids, how do they make that inner transformation where they have a new belief system based on the reality of what you found out by interviewing 1,200 people?
Yeah, that's the best question. That's exactly what I challenged myself to do as I was writing, because I thought to myself, I took all these notes over the years on these certain questions. And one of the top questions from the beginning was, what do you teach your kids? I always figured I was going to have kids, but I didn't have having kids. But I wrote all those notes. That was one question, was a staple. What do you teach your kids about money that people that don't have a lot of money, teach them, don't teach them. And so all these answers were there. And I thought as I was writing the book, how would you do that? What you just said, how would you teach them if you had your ideal way to do it? So I put a workbook together that people have the book. It's in the link is in the book. It's a free workbook. And what I recommend is they sit down with their kids, maybe when the time they're 8 or 9 or 10 years old, depending on the maturity level of the child, and sit down and fill the workbook out with the kids and talk to them about it, read the book with them and answer their questions, because they're going to hear all kinds of nonsense, as you know, about money when they go to, when they go out in the world. And, and if someone doesn't interfere with that, if someone doesn't, step in, the parent, of course, what we're talking about, they're probably going to believe it their entire lives. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to make a big difference, And so that's why I put that little workbook together and we give it away, and people have downloaded it all over the world, and we get a lot of stories about it because it's an activity they can do with the kids and fill the workbook out. And then if they say, well, tell me, they ask questions and they go back and forth. And I think it's something that kids are going to keep, their entire lives, because they did it with their parents, which is pretty cool.
And when you say kids, maybe we should define that. What is the age range that you are suspecting the people are going to read?
Well, the feedback so far we've gotten around from the book is probably 8, 9, 10 years old, depending on the maturity level. Okay. But I think it can be pretty early, Joe, because some of the concepts are a little more complicated than others, but most of them are pretty simple, and they can understand it and they start thinking about it in a different way, as we all do. But now you're grabbing them when they're in their formative years, when they're listening to people and they're watching TV, they're on the internet, they're on their cell phone or their mobile device, whatever, and they're hearing all these things in contrary to what we're saying. And because they're listening to the masses, unfortunately, and they're going to struggle probably with money. I mean, odds are they're going to struggle with money unless someone interferes with that and interjects, better programming.
And how do you think the parent's going to introduce the book and then the workbook? They just lay it on the table. It's bedtime reading. I mean, I don't know. I'm fishing. What would they do? What's the suggestion, or what have parents done?
That's the feedback I've got, because I was always thinking of it as bedtime reading, and we get all kinds of different things. But I think that's the most common thing is we're going to read one chapter a night and fill out the question. No big deal. Well, and we'll just keep going through it and until we're done. And then we'll talk, just a 5-minute thing a night or 10 minutes a night, or whatever you can fit it in. But we get more feedback about parents doing it with the kids at night, just a little at a time. You don't have to go through half the book in one weekend, or I wouldn't even recommend that. Right. Let them digest it. Let them think about it. Because some of these concepts they're simple, but they're hard to get your arms around when everyone in your world is telling you the polar opposite. Right. And I think that's most people's experience. It certainly was mine.
Right. And what I'm looking for is to help as many people, whether they're kids, parents, whatever it happens to be, to awaken. The show's called Zero Limits Living, to awaken to a place where there are no limits. The limits that we have around money, as far as I know, they're mental limits. They're mental constructs. They're beliefs. They're the ones we learn. When I was growing up, my father said, the best way to double your money, fold it over and put it back in your pocket. And I laughed just like you did. And I thought, boy, my dad's smart. And it took me a long time until I was pretty much homeless and in poverty. And I started reflecting and realized, wait a minute, he didn't double his money. He still has the same amount of money. And the money's not going anywhere. It's not growing or anything. I just opened your book at random. And I came to a chapter that I thought, boy, if a parent opened that, what are they going to think? Learn to suffer.
Yeah, right. That's sort of one of those things that kind of shocks people. Yeah, learn to suffer, in the idea that you're going to go against the grain. I think when you set out to stake your claim, and you know this, Joe, from personal experience like I do, you set out to stake your claim. Everyone in the beginning wants to take a shot at you, it seems like. Now, once you're successful, then everyone stops talking and going against you or challenging you, because now it's already a done deal. It's already, it's already happened. But in the beginning, when you go out to stake your claim, I think everyone comes at you. Oh, you can't do it. Who do you think you're a C-student? You didn't do this right. You're not as smart as other people, et cetera, whatever it is. And they come at you. And I think you have to sort of suffer through those processes more than probably the work itself. I think is the psychological suffering of having to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing as you're ascending toward, prosperity, that all these people are coming at you for different reasons. And it's a suffering process. Now, of course, once you're in the if you arrived at the Holy Land, you're where you want to be, or at the top of the mountain, then none of that feedback matters to you, because you won the game. But boy, when you're climbing the mountain, as you know, they can take a lot of shots at you. And I think there's a level of emotional suffering that occurs. And I think we have to be ready for that and prepare kids for it.
Well, there's two things that come to mind when you talk like that. One of them is when I'm going for something, especially I had to learn it the hard way, but when I'm going for a dream, whether it is to write a book or open some entrepreneurial movement, business of some sort, I don't tell anybody except the people who can assist me in creating it. And the reason why is so I don't get daggers. I don't get rain on my parade. I don't hear from the critics and the naysayers and the people who don't know. In fact, Napoleon Hill had said at one point, one of the chief causes of failure was listening to family and friends. They will hold you back.
Yeah.
And the other aspect of suffering, and this is something that I find all the people who watch the movie The Secret or learn about the law of attraction or learn about creating their reality or read even some of my books start to feel like there's never going to be a problem again. All you have to do is close your eyes, visualize, feel it real, and it'll, doorbell will ring, and there's whatever it is that you were ordering from the universe. And we both know that the visualizing and the requesting and the action are all steps. But there's days when it rains. There's days when there's a flood. There's days when things don't happen the way you expect. And the people that fall into thinking it's just going to be easy forever miss out on the reality that there's moments of suffering.
No question. And I think we have to prepare them for that suffering. I mean, they kind of like what some of the parents talk about and the coaches talk about, this sort of everyone gets a trophy type approach, which,
yes.
Psychologists kind of defend it and say, well, you're trying to give the kids a healthy experience, which I understand. But at the same time, the world is broken out into people that are achieving something and succeeding and people that are not. And it doesn't make them any less as people, but it's just, that's the way the system works. So, I mean, you want them to have a healthy experience, but you also want to prepare them to fight for what they want and for what they believe in and all those things. And I think so they don't turn out to be, sometimes what they call snowflakes, and they're so sensitive to everything because the world is not sensitive back. Wouldn't it be great, Joe, if love made the world go round, but hopefully maybe someday it will, and we'll be happy about it, but it's currently not that way. So if you send them out there with that philosophy, they're just going to get killed. And from an emotional standpoint. And so I think preparing them to fight the good fight and understand how to process that is, it's an invaluable gift.
Well, it just triggers the idea of what about fear? How do you handle fear? What is your advice for parents to tell the kids about fear? Because we bring up struggle and we say all that we're talking about. I could imagine if I was a little kid hearing about this, I would go, man, I don't know if I want to go for it. Or if I do go for it, how do I protect myself? How do I handle the fear? How do I make sure I keep coming from faith?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the thing that I tried to focus on, and I wrote about this in the book, is that teach the kids to not fear failure. Because if you look at self-made millionaires, I mean, the big joke is everyone remembers that Babe Ruth is the home run king. But what they don't usually talk about is that he's also the strikeout king. And so no one mentions that. So I think preparing them that becoming, say, a self-made millionaire or prosperous or, financially independent, however you want to label it, is a process typically for most people of failing and failing and failing and failing, like they're professional failures. I look at my track record, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you're doing interviews and you're talking on stage or whatever it is, and people, you get your bio, like you read my bio kind of a thing, and you hear all the wonderful things, but what they don't hear, and we probably should tell them in the bio, is most of it was failure. 90% it was failure. Then you hit a home run or two or three or whatever, and then everyone remembers that. But I think if they understand that most people have failed their way to success, but they weren't afraid of failure. So they just picked up and got back up and kept going. And then eventually, they just had to win by just default. I mean, at some point you got to get lucky, and then they do, and everyone says, oh, everything they touch turns to gold. So I think if they understand the way it usually works with people with self-made millionaires, then when they fail, they won't be afraid of failing because it's actually part and parcel of the process.
Yeah. Great points. Somebody counted and said, I've written 84 books, and I didn't know that. I'm too busy writing my books to stop and count them. And then somebody else asked about their success level. And it's like a handful of those 84 are actually noteworthy and being sold and talked about. The rest of them were almost like practice swings I'm sure they're going to live out there in some way and be part of a legacy. But for the most part, no, I would say like you, is that some of them I'd look at and go, didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do.
Half of my books, Joe, I keep doors open. I prop doors open. They're good. They make all kinds of useful household utility things.
Right.
No one knows it except me. My mother bought the book and then returned it for a refund. One of those things.
That's hilarious. Well, what about the kids who haven't valued money yet? In fact, I'm just now remembering. It was years ago. I went to go visit my family, and newborn, I guess it was a nephew at the time. He was given a birthday card, and inside of it was $3. And he opened it up. He got the $3, and he just kind of left them on the floor. It meant nothing to him. It could have been 3 sheets of newspaper clippings or 3 sheets of toilet paper. It meant zero. How do you teach the kids to value money? Or if they're at the age, and I've heard this too, where they say, I don't really care about money.
Yeah, that was the program we were fed over and over by adults of influence, as they say when you're growing up, and all kinds of teachers and coaches and ministers and clergy and all kinds of people saying that, money is not going to make you happy. Money. I mean, how many times do we hear that? Money doesn't make you happy. The thing is money. The truth of it is, objectively speaking, money is absolutely one of the most important things in life, just because without it, you're going to work for people that have it, and you're going to take orders from people, and you're going to be pushed around and things like that. And, you want to sleep inside as opposed to outside, and you want to drive a car instead of walk. And these are, it's one of the most important things in life. And of course, being rich isn't going to make you happier than being, say, in the middle class, maybe. But that said, it's one of the most important things in life. It makes your life a lot easier. It's just something you have to have. So to your point, Joe, I think that's really important to help them understand how important of a thing this is. Yet at the same time, it has limits. Of course, it's not going to make you happier because you drive a Rolls Royce as opposed to driving, a Kia. I have a Kia, as a matter of fact, and I love my Kia. I call it the Rolls Royce, but it's a Kia. And so, it doesn't make you any happier, but it really is such an important thing that you've got to pay attention to it. Otherwise, you're gonna be subservient to people who do.
And what about the spirituality of money? You do have a topic in the book where you address that, but I thought it would be worth bringing up here because a lot of the people that are drawn to the show probably have a spiritual, new agey kind of slant to them because of the title, Zero Limits Living, and because of me and my work with Law of Attraction, The Secret, personal development, and such. What about how does spirituality and money get along?
Yeah, our mutual friend who just, of course, passed away, Bob Proctor. What a great guy. And him and I, for 25 years, him and I had this running dialogue about this, about sort of the spiritual side of prosperity. And, what he always talked about as a mentor was, get enough of it back when, we didn't have anything. He said, get enough of it so you can give it away, so you can help other people, so you can. Yes. You can write. That's the greatest feeling in the world is when you're helping someone that's just struggling because, we all know what it's like there. Most of us at least know what it's like to struggle, especially with money, and it's not fun. And it's, I think if there's at least in my mind, if there's a spiritual element to it, it would be, geez, the world is in need. Give it back, give as much back as you can. You're going to feel great anyway. And you're going to help someone who really needs it, so. I think that'd be my spiritual angle on it anyway.
Which is a beautiful one. But you also in the book talk about the fact, this is a very real fact, that the self-made millionaires are the biggest givers. And it's the wealthy who are giving away their wealth. Whether we go big time and go to Gates or Buffett or somebody of that sort, they've actually made it their life mission.
Yeah, no question. One of the people I interviewed 3 times over the last 30 plus years was Rich DeVos, who started Amway. Yeah. And owned the Orlando Magic, and of course, a multi-billionaire, one of the richest people in the country. And I met Rich a long time ago, probably 25 years ago, and we spoke on some different programs together. One time about 20 years ago, I guess, in Palm Beach, Florida, Boynton Beach, which is near Palm Beach, we were doing a fundraiser for the YMCA. And so it was me and Rich DeVos and Bill Gove, my late business partner, and a few other people. people. And Rich was heading it up for the Y, and we had about 2,000 people there in the audience. We were trying to raise $3 million in an hour. And so bottom line was we raised $1 million in an hour. And Rich came backstage and we said, we're so disappointed and sorry. We did the best we could. Everyone pushed as much as we could. We gave as much value as we could. And Rich said, you know what, guys, it's not a problem. I'm just going to write a check for the other 2 million. Anybody have any questions? Great. And we put $3 million down. I mean, I talked to him after that about that, because we were on the committee together for a couple of years. And he said, you know what, there's not a feeling like that to give to an organization like the YMCA, who just does nothing but good for people at the end of the day, and he says it's just a great feeling to be able to do it and give it to an organization that's really, worthwhile.
That is a beautiful story. And what I teach people and remind myself is one of the very best reasons to be wealthy or a self-made millionaire or beyond is that you can contribute to the causes and the people you care about, rather than sitting there and just complaining about pockets of Africa or the Ukraine or anywhere. You actually can bring the money into yourself, and now you are a steward. You can give it all away if you like. You can save some, invest some, give some, do whatever, but you're at a position where you can do something. I've known people over the years who did volunteer work. And I remember one woman said, it takes a lot of money to volunteer. None of that is given, maybe her physical labor is given, but everything else, room, board, food, all of this kind of stuff, somebody's paying for it.
That's right.
So I think that is profound. As I look at your book and I think about kids, I keep thinking to myself, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning this because these are ideas you can take and run to the bank. How about a coloring book? How about an app? Yeah. How about a little movie? How about an animation? How about a documentary? How about, there's several things, thinking from the kids' way of receiving information and there's probably other ones. Since I don't have kids, I can't even think of what they would come up with or want.
How about this, Joe? What about a crayon set? Remember we used to have the crayon sets?
Right.
Did you have the 128 or the 64? You remember those?
I used to eat them. You put them on the radiator in school and they would melt.
Too much time on the railroad, Joe. Too much time, man. No, I thought all crayons, but they're all green. All green crayons.
Oh, I like that. I wouldn't know which one to pick.
The Stephen Job crayon set. All green. Yeah, exactly.
Money is not evil. That's a big one. That's the one. I don't care what country I went in, and I'm sure this is the same for you. One of the last countries I was in before the pandemic was Iran. Yeah. And I found that this belief, money is evil, was in every country, whether it was Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Italy, US, Canada, Bermuda, Peru, they all seem to have money is the root of all evil. You have got a chapter, Money is Not Evil. Explain, please.
Well, I think it's biblical where it doesn't actually say it's evil, as you know, but right. It's sort of interpreted that way. I think it's the shorthand is, comes out to be money is evil, but the love of money is what it says, of course, in the Bible, that is the root of all evil. But I think that people, that kind of transfers to people, and it's an easy excuse to say, well, I don't want to be rich because the rich people don't go to heaven, so I want to go to heaven. So I don't want to be an evil person. But at the same time, I mean, I think the reality is that money has nothing to do with good or bad. I mean, you and I have both seen people, and I've had business partners, unfortunately, that, we started out with very little money. The company grew, everybody got successful, everyone, made a lot of money, and all of a sudden they become someone else. And then people say, well, that's what money does to you. It makes me look how they're jerks. I mean, they become arrogant and self-serving and all those negative, nasty things. They become egomaniacs, and they're driving around in Ferraris and posting them on social media and all that stuff, whatever. And people say, well, look, they became jerks. The money doesn't turn you into that. That money, I think, at least in my experience, makes people more of who they already are.
I totally agree. Amen to that.
So it's not the money, right?
Yeah, it's not the money at all. Yeah. I've often held up a pen and just said, is this pen bad? With this pen, I can probably stab you. With this pen, I can write you a check. But it's not the pen. It's me.
Or write 84 books.
No, I'm going to have another one,
Joe. That's a lot of books. We got to get you another hobby.
I got 15 more books in mind and 3 more done. I'm waiting for the people who buy books to catch up. It's like, I got the Joe Vitale Book of the Month Club going on. Because we just went through the pandemic, and you are a major speaker. You are a my God, so prestigious, it's hard to even explain how high up you are. How have you handled not being able to travel, not being able to be on stage, having to skip out on the high paying gigs because during the 2 years or more of the intense restrictions of a pandemic, you probably didn't go out? What did you do?
I tell you, I stayed at home and I absolutely loved it. And I called Bob Proctor about maybe, I don't know, about a year into it. I mean, I would talk to him on a regular basis, but about a year into the pandemic, because, you know, he loved to travel. He bought a plane. Yeah. You know, years ago, he goes, let's go on, like 15 years ago, he comes to me, he says, let's go on a plane. Mark Victor Hansen's going to do it with us, and I'm going to do it, and you do it. And we got 8 of us, we're going to buy a jet. And I said, I want to get off Delta, not on Delta. I don't want to own Delta, you know? And he bought one anyway. So he loved to travel. And I said, well, I come Uncle Bob. I said, Uncle Bob, I said, well, how do you like it not being in your plane all the time? He goes, I love it. It's fantastic. I'm at home all the time. He built a studio in his backyard. And so he walked to his backyard out to his studio. And I went up there and saw it. It was really cool. And I loved it. I'm the same way. I loved being at home, and I like being on stage. But I'll tell you what, Joe, if I could just write books and write stuff and live above a drugstore really, and just do writing and never travel again, and I'd be happy. But I like a lot of money in the bank too, because that's kind of nice just to have that. But I don't mind living above the drugstore.
Well, I can imagine that you're okay with not traveling, because I got to the point, especially when the pandemic was showing up and I couldn't travel. Part of me was like, that's okay. You know, I wanted to be home for a while. I was tired of living out of the suitcase. But what about the money part of it? Our whole show is about, you know, secret self-made millionaires teach their kids. And I'm also probing with you. So you couldn't make the big money. Were you just comfortably living off of what you had? Or did you do something different? Did you find a different problem to solve virtually?
Yeah, the money part sucked, just to be clear. Yeah. So there's no, no, we lost millions, you know, just because of all that, like a lot of people did and everything. But we pivoted. I wrote another book with a financial expert in Atlanta here named Tom Matthews called How Money Works. And it's been the #1 financial book in the U.S. selling wise for the last couple of years. So we got lucky with that one. And then we promoted that and did about 250 TV interviews for him, still doing the promotion for the book. And so we got lucky with that book and kind of built everything around that. And then did all the TV interviews I've done from like everyone's doing from my office, like I'm doing here with you. And so we were very fortunate to have that. But in terms of the speaking business, it just stopped, you know, it just absolutely stopped. So it was little bit of a bloodbath. But that's another thing about money, Joe, as you know, you never know what's going to happen. And that's why I think we always encourage people, make money and save it, invest it, but live below your means, because if something happens, if we wouldn't have lived below our means, we would have been in trouble financially, because we certainly took a bath on the money. But be conservative, be careful.
You're in a mansion. Is that below your means?
Okay, good point. You got me on. I didn't see that coming. You got me on that one. Okay. Besides a mansion, live below your means. Well, right. It's an affordable mansion for us. So.
Well, you got 17 rooms in that mansion. What are you doing with at least 15 of them?
Well, I try to walk in them at least once a day. Funny enough, I bought it as a commercial. We bought it, my wife and I, as a commercial property. But then we brought clients there because it's a 6 acre. It's got 6 acres and 5 buildings. And so we have a studio, the old carriage house, a 100-year-old property called Bona Allen Mansion. And so we started doing programs, seminars, and brought clients in from all over the world, from corporations. And we have a guest house and the tennis court and all stuff. And so it was great to bring clients in. Of course, then when everything shut down, we stopped doing that. But then we ended up moving into it and turning it into a residential, to a home. And so it's been really good. But it's great to bring clients into. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of history here. So
I bet. And do you still run the Mental Toughness University?
Yeah, we put it on video during the pandemic, and now we're starting to enter back into corporations again, very slowly. It's moving slowly, but they're starting to open up. But there's a situation with lawsuits potentially if people get COVID and it's on the dime of the corporation. There's always concerns about, because we work with, as you know, really big companies and they have legal concerns. And so we're going to get out there doing it. But I tell you the truth, after 5 weeks of battling COVID the first year, I'm not going out and doing what I did before. It's just life's too short. I was pretty close to the end of that deal.
Oh, so, I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear it. Well, you look radiant.
You look healthy, make it, as you know.
Yeah. Are you going to make the mental toughness for kids?
Yeah, I haven't planned on doing that, but I think when you and I release our new crayon line and coloring book, Joe, I think we can do this together. This could be a good thing.
Right, right. The two guys with no kids who are going to release this.
We're experts on kids. Exactly. Perfect.
There's so many things in this book and so many things we can talk about that you've learned over the years. What are a couple takeaways? We're running out of time. There's parents, they got their kids, they're going to go get the book, Secret Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. Are there a couple to-dos, thoughts, something you want them to really remember right now?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would pass on is that 38 years of these interviews, and the book, of course, was an extension of that, but just all this experience, a lifetime, basically, with these super rich people. Some of these people, about 300 of these people were billionaires or are billionaires now. And what I really learned, Joe, I think overall was they're no smarter or better, or in most cases, educated than we are. Now, yeah, they're the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates, and some of these people are just Nito Cobain. I think Nito.
Yes.
Nito Cobain. I mean, he's another genius. I mean, there are people like that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Nito. This guy operates at a whole different level. There are people like that. But I would say 99% of them are just like the rest of us. They have an average education, average background, average intelligence, but they're focused. They know what they want, and they're focused on becoming financially successful. It's one of their focuses. And I would say that, so I think the lesson is any one of us can really do this. Maybe I'm not going to be Elon Musk or Steve, Jobs or someone like that, but I have a chance at financial prosperity, even if I'm the average person walking down the street, which clearly I am. But anyone can really do it. Don't be intimidated, I would say to people. Don't think these people are any smarter than you, because I spent my life with them and most of them are not.
That's beautiful. What are you excited about next? What are you doing next that's getting your blood pumping?
Ever since the COVID thing, Joe, I really thought a lot about, I was laying in bed for 5 weeks, sweating, losing weight. I mean, that was just a out of body experience. I've never been that sick in my life. I mean, I couldn't even crawl out of bed. And I thought a lot about, just how lucky I've been and how many mentors I've had. And, just to be so fortunate to live your dream and, have these fantasies about doing things. And then you walk right into them like it's a movie. I want to help other people be able to do that. I've gotten my dream. I lived my dream and I'm really grateful for it. But I want to help other people that want to do this, that want to have a dream about being a speaker. And we run the Bill Grove Speech Workshop, of course, the keynote speaker training we've run for so many years. And so we're doing that here at the mansion and helping people with their books and their just to live this dream. If it's someone that has the dream, because as you know, it's a charmed life. And I don't mean the money. The money's great, but I don't know about you, but I think you'd probably agree with me. If it was a choice between the money and living the dream, I'd take the dream all day long, even if I made an average living, which clearly we were able not to get past it. But the dream is if you get to do what you want to do every day and then you're successful at some level at it, that's a charmed life. And I'd like to help other people be able to do that if it's something they want to do. And how can people reach you? I'm easy to find on Google, like you. We're out there all over the place. I have a blog, Mental Toughness blog. We have a podcast now called mentaltoughness.podcast.org, and we put that out. And so I'm easy to find on the internet and whatnot, just like you were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So, do you have any last words? We'll put it that way. Yeah, I do. I'm glad you asked me that, Joe, because I want to turn this back to you because you're very kind with your introduction and whatnot. And I appreciate the kind words and the sentiments. I want to just take that back to you because, you've done a lot of good for a lot of people. And I hear your name come up on, and I have for 25 years all over the world. You've done a lot of good for the world, Joe. And I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to be able to say this publicly because I've said it to you privately over the years, but I want to say it publicly that, I appreciate your work. You've done great work. You've helped a lot of people and you're one of the forces for good in the world. And man, we need it now. So thank you for what you've done. Thanks for making me speechless. Steve, thank you. Thank you. I feel it and I got it. I've been talking to Steve Siebold, who just choked me up, and his book, he has several books, Secret Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. It's on Amazon. Go get it.
I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. This is Zero Limits Living. Every week, I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. You can watch the show, listen to this show on 1,000 different platforms, including Roku and YouTube and Amazon Fire and Apple TV, or just go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com and watch them all. ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. Check out Miracles Coaching. I started it 20 years ago, trademarked, proven, tested. It can help you, but find out for yourself with a free consultation. Go to miraclescoaching.com. Also want to thank Lux Media Studios for putting this on. They're out in Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. And Chris, who's behind the camera, Candace Barr for making this possible. All of you and all of your kids who tuned in today. Let's go make a difference, follow the light, and expect miracles.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radical, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.